Clearer skies, temperatures will drop off a touch more here. We could get as low as -5, -6 degrees Celsius in the most sheltered rural areas. Maybe some icy stretches around where surfaces are still wet due to all these showers that aren't pushing their way in. And really throughout Monday it is a very similar picture. Always cloudiest towards the east, those showers turning wintry over higher ground sites, particularly the Pennines tomorrow, but over towards the west it will be a little bit drier and a little bit brighter as well. Once again though, northwestern Scotland, the Highlands and the Outer Hebrides seeing the best day overall. Cold for most of us though, 4 degrees Celsius as our top temperatures, and on that wind chill factor it's going to be feeling more like freezing, and it's a picture we've got to get used to because it's going to stay that way throughout this week. Enjoy your day. Bye bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. In honour of Charles Dickens's 213th birthday, which was last Friday, I begin with one of his most famous ruminations. Have a heart that never hardens, and a temper that never tires, and a touch that never hurts. Sound advice indeed, dear viewers, as I welcome you to Sunday with Michael Portillo. We have 2 hours of culture, politics and current affairs to enjoy. Dominic Cummings has admitted that he orchestrated the plot to bring down Boris Johnson. Now he says of the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, that she is a useless dud and that she'll be got rid of before long. I'll ask my panel about whether his views can be influential even now and how the panel feels about the power wielded by unelected political appointees. Tuesday will be the 50th anniversary of Margaret Thatcher becoming leader of the Conservative Party. I had the pleasure to serve the Iron Lady in opposition and in government. To mark this moment in history, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, Secretary of State for Scotland in her cabinet, will join me to reflect on the anniversary. Sir Keir Starmer announced plans to make it easier to construct mini nuclear power stations. It comes in the same week that the government relaunched the Net Zero Council. The former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight, will join me to discuss the impact of those new policies. And Stefan Kyriazis will be here to update me on his theatrical excursions during the week. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Michael, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. These are your headlines. The Prime Minister has sacked one of his health ministers over offensive comments he's reported to have made in a WhatsApp group. Andrew Gwynn has also been suspended as a member of the Labour Party and has since apologised for what he calls misjudged comments. It follows an expose by the Mail on Sunday claiming Mr Gwynn reportedly made anti-Semitic comments and joked about a pensioner constituent, saying he hoped she died before the next election. It's also alleged that he attacked members of his own party, including making racist slights towards Labour MP Diane Abbott and sexist comments towards Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook praised Sir Keir Starmer for acting decisively.
Comments made by Andrew Gwynn are completely unacceptable. That this is going to be a government that upholds the highest standards of conduct in public life. We're a government in service of working people, so we've taken decisive action to dismiss Andrew Gwynn as a minister, as is the case. There's a live investigation going on in terms of the Labour Party. Andrew Gwynn's been administratively suspended. He's lost the Labour whip. I don't know what was said in those WhatsApp groups. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chancellor Alex Burkhardt said Andrew Gwynn's comments just show Sir Keir Starmer hasn't got a hold of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party.
The worst thing that I've seen Mr Gwynn say on that group was that one gentleman was too Jewish. Now, Keir Starmer claims that he's gotten on top of this problem in the Labour Party, but he clearly hasn't. We need to know who else was on that group. Did they call Andrew Gwynn out when he said that? If not, what sanctions are going to be taken against them? You know, we need all of this out in the open as quickly as possible, because otherwise it's the same old Labour, same old anti-Semitism within the left in this country, and you know, it shows that Labour hasn't changed at all.
In other news, the parents of two girls killed in the Southport knife attack say they're looking for light in the darkness. Speaking to the Sunday Times, 7-year-old Elsie Stankum and 6-year-old BB King's families remembered their daughters as confident, happy and intelligent. They opened up about their children's funerals and the support from their communities in the months since the horrendous attack. Alice da Silva Aguiar also lost her life that day. Prince Harry and Meghan cheered and clapped as United Kingdom's team walked on the stage for the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in Canada. The couple arrived in Vancouver yesterday for the 7th edition of the Games, which were established by Prince Harry in 2014. Their public appearance comes just hours after Donald Trump confirmed he won't move to deport the Duke of Sussex. Speaking in an interview, the US president said, "I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife." And Friends star David Schwimmer has called on ex-owner Elon Musk to remove Kanye West from the platform. It comes after West appeared to write a barrage of posts on his social media account, making offensive comments, including about Jewish people, and appearing to mock domestic violence. The actor, Mr. Schwimmer, took to Instagram to urge Mr. Musk to remove West from X because of his hate-filled, ignorant bile. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia Wensler. Dominic Cummings, who masterminded the pro-Brexit campaign and was Boris Johnson's right-hand man in Downing Street, admits on the record that he also brought him down. He and friends agreed that Boris could not be left in place, rattling around number 10, making a whole set of appalling decisions. He dismisses the new Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, as a bad joke. Are those remarks likely to be influential? How do we feel about the power wielded by political appointees? For example, what role did Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer's chief of staff, play in the demise of his predecessor, Sue Gray? With me now is my panel, pollster and director at JL Partners, Scarlett Maguire, broadcaster Candice Holsworth, and former Conservative Special Advisor and Chief of Staff to Nadhim Zahawi, James Price. Candice, what do you feel about this? First of all, do you think that these remarks might be influential, for example, about Kemi Badenoch?
Well, from what I've heard, people aren't quite sure about her approach that she's taking. You know, the sort of, it's easy as it goes, we've got time, let's take time to diagnose. Others are saying, actually, events are moving really fast. They're looking to America, where Donald Trump has come in with Elon Musk and the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things. And they're saying, we want that here. We want that level of system disruption. And I don't think it's just on the Conservative right as well. People I've spoken to in Labour are also saying the same thing, that actually the system is broken and we need to do something about it. And what has surprised me totally is people who I know found Donald Trump repulsive 8 years ago and now saying, actually, I quite like what he's doing. So it's possible Cummings has picked his moment quite well to say something like this, and it could influence people that maybe, just maybe, Kemi Badenoch's approach is just not the right one right now. I personally think that she looks at things the same way he does. She's just not forceful enough about it. And maybe she needs to be a bit more forceful and a bit more radical.
She looks at things the same way that Dominic Cummings does. What do you mean by that?
She also has a systems-level analysis of things. You know, when I've heard her talk about it, she tends to say, listen, no matter which party is in charge, if you have a system which has all the wrong incentives in it, it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to make the same choices.
We're talking here about the civil service, about what they call the blob.
Yes, exactly. So she has said that explicitly. I think she thinks in the same way. But I don't know if she'll come in and do sort of like a hard system reboot, like someone like Elon Musk will, for instance.
James, I think this is a very interesting topic. Let's take the point, does Kemi have time or not? I've said that we're coming up to Margaret Thatcher's anniversary of becoming leader. She did have a bit of time, and she put in place this philosophical basis. So she got lots of academics to write interesting papers and books and so on. And that gave her a tremendous, solid intellectual grounding. I think Kemi wanted to do the same. The difference, of course, is that Margaret Thatcher did not face this threat on the right that Kemi faces. So what is the timescale? Has Kemi potentially either miscalculated, or does she need to make a new calculation about how long she's got?
It's the question that will decide whether, I suppose, she gets the keys to Downing Street or not. As you say, that Margaret Thatcher had all those people around her. She had some time. There was a very clear philosophical ethos that, you know, the state was in some essence the problem, that trade union power was too strong and inflation was running too high. There were amazing people, my political hero like John Hoskins, coming in and doing that kind of systems analysis with very nerdy wiring diagrams and all of that sort of stuff. As you say, she had the time to do that. Kemi Badenoch's approach might have been right, as you say, were it not for reform being there, and for the fact that when Thatcher was in, you know, you had the kind of tumultuous times of Ted Heath and Wilson and all this back and forth. You didn't have one long 14-year period where my party didn't achieve a huge amount and made several mistakes, which is kind of the point that Dominic Cummings, I suppose, has highlighted, that you had people rocketing around in number 10 Downing Street making these sorts of errors. And Kemi has to be quite decisive, I think, in making a break from all of those things in the past. Otherwise, it's so easy for reform to just say, well, why didn't you do that in your 14 years? And that's really corrosive.
I disagree with you on that last point. I mean, I think there was a lot of similarity there, because the Conservative government of the early 1970s had done this tremendous U-turn halfway through. So the principles on which it had started, which you could describe as Thatcherite, it were abandoned in 1972, and it became a different sort of government. So I think Margaret Thatcher actually was fighting a similar problem there, that she was having to disown what the previous government had done. The thing was, she was entirely credible as a disruptor. This is the word of the morning, in a way. Mrs. Thatcher was credible as a disruptor. Is Kemi credible as a disruptor?
I think it probably still remains to be seen. I think what we've seen this week is, after a little while of saying, I'm not going to put out any policies for a couple of years, you saw a fairly punchy policy announcement from the Conservatives, this idea that a migrant will have to now spend 10 years here, not just 5 years before they get this indefinite leave to remain, the idea that people can stay, and that if you've got a criminal record, you won't be able to stay, all those sorts of things. That's a good start. That's really punchy. But I think she's going to have to break this policy of saying, I'm not announcing anything else for 2 years, because they'll just be left in the dust by that point. If she comes out with stuff that seems really radical and really credible, with a proper path to doing it, because the Tories still have a bench strength of people who know just how tough it is to get anything done with the blob as is currently constituted, that's her path to doing it, because Farage and his team might say a lot of attractive things, but they don't have experience in government of fighting and wading through the treacle that is, I'm afraid, dealing with the civil service.
Your definition of punchy and mine are, I think, different. Scarlett, let's have some facts. What are the polls doing? I believe your company, JL Partners, has a poll out today. Am I right or wrong?
It does. It has a, well, it's not quite a poll, it's a new sort of model.
What does it tell us?
It tells us that Labour are down, that Reform are on the rise, and that at the moment it's a slightly complicated model in that it's based off local council by-election results and extrapolated from there, but that if there was to be a general election, that no party would be strong enough to form a majority on its own.
There was a poll that was not yours out a few days ago, which roughly gave Reform UK, Conservative and Labour 170 seats each. So very much a hung parliament. Does your poll tell us anything similar to that, or is it a different sort of poll?
I mean, firstly, it is a different sort of poll, but also, without wanting to do down my own poll or any other polls as well, I'm slightly less interested in seat extrapolations at the moment. I think they're very interesting in that anyone can look at the polls and see that all three parties are under and consistently under 30%, which is crucial. But I'm more interested in the direction of travel for each of the parties, and then what you can infer from that for what it means for conversations like we've just been having about the Conservative strategy, say the Reform strategy and Labour strategy as well. And I think what you can take from that broader picture, and again, what our poll that is out today reflects, while our other poll that you mentioned, is the directions of travel for the three parties are quite clear. So Labour quite substantially down on where it was in the election. At the moment, that's actually being driven more by voters going to don't know than it is from voters stampeding towards other parties, but it's still very relevant. The Conservative Party, having spent much of the last 6 months just standing still from their worst ever election defeat, now actually going slightly backwards, which is obviously an even worse position for them to be in, and Reform steadily on the rise. And I think that's why you had Kemi Badenoch announced some policies this week. I think they're spooked in CCHQ, and I think Labour are quite worried about this too, because it doesn't just hurt the Conservatives, it hurts the Conservatives more, but Labour are now 7 points down on where they were after their 2019 defeat with Jeremy Corbyn, so no party is in a particularly good position. But if you look at the direction of travel, it's Reform that's doing well.
A very, very interesting conversation. Candice, it doesn't sound like Kemi does have much time, but Scarlett used the word spooked there, and that's rather what I feel is happening. I mean, almost worse than not reacting is to react badly, you know, to look as if you're really scared and start producing policies that haven't been thought through. What might your advice to Kemi be, do you think?
Yes, don't flail. But I do think that the moment that we're in the moment now, which kind of rewards pragmatists and almost Machiavellian type people, which in the Times piece, Dominic Cummings was described as, you know, the people who can shift quickly. And I think you do have to shift quickly. And I would say that to Kemi. Be prepared to shift if you have to. Sort of read the mood.
James, do you think your advice to Kemi, if you were giving it, would have changed over the last few months? Do you think something has happened that was not anticipated when Kemi was elected?
I think it was always a risky move to suggest that Reform wouldn't make big inroads. But I think, again, the strength the Conservatives have got is a long philosophical history that we sort of know what works, that people, that individuals, that families, that businesses, they know how to spend their lives and spend their money and live their lives better than the government ever can. And they've got enough experience in the Conservative benches to know how difficult it is to get things done, and therefore the kinds of reforms to the state that are needed. I don't think that should take 2 years to be able to come out with those sorts of ideas, given the history that the Conservatives have got of doing this right under Mrs Thatcher and other people. So let's get on with those sorts of policies, announce them, and save the country from socialism.
Scarlett, if Kemi came to you and asked for professional advice about how long she's got, what should be the pace of... Well, you talked earlier about, you said you were interested in the policy ramifications of what these polls were saying. Does she have time? Should she be getting policies out there fast, or should she hold steady and build up the philosophical basis of what she's going to say?
I mean, I've been saying ever since she was elected as leader that I don't think her or the Conservative Party have been acting with the urgency that the situation requires. I think it was perfectly clear by the time that leadership election happened, because it was quite a long time after the general election result, that Reform were sort of eating their lunch, and that they needed to get a move on, and they needed to actively sell themselves that they're not just... It's this, yes, they are the official party of opposition, but that's not necessarily how they get transmitted to the public if they're not out there actively making the case and saying what they're going to do. And I think it's even things like treating the media or airtime in a certain way, not even necessarily traditional media outlets, but having this approach that you're going to be out there the entire time taking the fight to Reform. And in my mind, I think the Conservative Party and Reform Party at the moment are in this sort of fight to the death. We'll see how that transpires. And the difference for me at the moment is in the last few months, Reform have been acting like that's the fight they're in, and the Conservatives have been acting like they don't know that that's going on, which I don't quite understand. But, so I would have said to have acted with a whole lot of urgency, a whole lot quicker. And actually, to your point about making policy mistakes and to Candace's point about moving fast and breaking things, I think that the Conservative Party had quite a reputation for moving slowly and still managing to break things. So I think it's probably better just to try and to pick up the pace, regardless of what happens, because the standing still was not an option for them.
It's just beginning to settle in my mind that the Conservatives are in third position. It seems to me, if that is a settled view, that's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, and I think it is dangerous for the Conservative Party just because if you look at where the polls are at the moment, put what I said about direction of travel aside, there is still a very big chunk, probably about 1 in 3 Conservative voters, or at least last time we polled it was, that would think Nigel Farage makes a better Prime Minister than Kemi Badenoch. So there's still a lot of that Conservative vote that actually, on the surface of things, look quite reformy anyway. So there's a potential for a whole chunk more to go still.
Panel, thank you very much. That's Scarlett Maguire, Candice Holdsworth, James Price. They'll be back at noon to discuss the ethics of pulling down the Grenfell Tower. Do you fancy your chance to be one of 2 lucky winners in the current Great British Giveaway? Well, we have 2 fabulous prize bundles to give away, which both contain £500 worth of shopping vouchers for your favourite store, the latest iPhone 16 and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. Here are the details you need.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British Giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck!
Coming up, Tuesday is the 50th anniversary of Margaret Thatcher becoming leader of the opposition. So Malcolm Rifkind, who is also a member of the Iron Ladies Cabinet, will join me next. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers, and more people appear to be getting diagnosed with bowel cancer in their 50s. Not entirely clear why. And there was an inspirational woman called Deborah James who I actually met when I used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, and I remember meeting her when she had her cancer diagnosis and supporting her campaign, and she sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but it was a phenomenal campaign, and I think did inspire the nation. And this is so important. So people in their 50s are going to be sent these kits in the post. And I suppose my plea is just do not ignore these kits because you can deal with cancer if you catch it early enough.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is not the most pleasant thing to do, and a lot of us aren't used to it and talking about it and whatever, but it's essential, obviously, to do.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the other reason I wanted to sort of flag this is, I mean, we can sometimes make ourselves sort of pretty miserable looking at the newspapers, but this is undoubtedly a good initiative that the government have done this, and that campaigners have persuaded the government to do this. So, look, I just want to plea to everybody watching, if you get one of these kits, use it.
And, of course, I think it's really important within that to point out that this would not have helped Deborah, because Deborah was 40 when she died. And what's really important when you see stories like this is to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And if you have symptoms that are weird, it is important to go to your doctor and to talk about them and to take the tests.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Tuesday, the 11th of February, marks 50 years since Margaret Thatcher became leader of the Conservative Party. When she challenged the leader and former Prime Minister Edward Heath in February 1975, she surprisingly won the first ballot by 130 votes to his 119. And Mrs Thatcher then went on to defeat Willie Whitelaw and Sir Geoffrey Howe in the second ballot. Joining me now to reflect on Lady Thatcher's time at home is the former Secretary of State for Scotland in her cabinet, Sir Malcolm Rifkin. Malcolm, good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, you were in the House in 1975, so you had the opportunity as a Member of Parliament to vote in the leadership election. In those days, members of the party outside Parliament did not vote. How did you vote?
Well, you're a year out for a start. It was 74, because we had the 2 elections in 74. I was elected in February. In October, Heath lost again. She challenged him. And in the first round, I voted for Ted Heath. Why did I vote for Ted Heath? Because I knew him. I'd never met Margaret Thatcher. She seemed rather strident. And I was at that sort of end of the party. When Heath was defeated and dropped out, and I had the choice of Thatcher or Whitelaw or Pryor or Howe, I actually voted for Margaret. And I voted for Margaret for 2 reasons. First of all, I'd seen her in the chamber and I thought she's a tough operator, and that's what we need in opposition. But also, part of me said, wouldn't it be marvellous if the stuffy old Tory party was the first to produce a woman Prime Minister, in those days unknown in the Western world? And I've never regretted that.
You regard yourself, perhaps, as I do, as being somewhat outside the Conservative Party establishment. Is that right? I mean, some of the figures you've mentioned there, Sir Geoffrey Howe, Willie Whitelaw, Jim Pryor, these were hugely establishment figures. They were rather rich. They were a little bit old. Some of them had very distinguished war records.
Sure. It was a different generation.
And you felt a bit of an outsider?
Well, only because I was a youngster. I mean, I was 27 when I became a Member of Parliament, so I was a young whippersnapper, and I was obviously in admiration of all these grand people. But you can still, when you're in the House of Commons, as you will recall, you get to see them in a quite different way to sometimes how the public as a whole see them. So you see their personalities, you see their strengths and weaknesses on a day-to-day basis. And they all had strengths and some of them had weaknesses, but Margaret gradually established the position she did, not simply because of her opinions, but it was also her personality. She was a very strong personality. She had vigour, she had consistency. You knew where you stood. She was either gloriously right or terribly wrong, and we've both had experience of these phenomena.
Let's go back to the early days. How quickly do you think she was good at Prime Minister's questions, facing first Harold Wilson until 1976 and thereafter Jim Callaghan.
Well, what most impressed me and what influenced my decision to vote for her in the second round of the leadership election was her performance in the House of Commons, because she was shadow front bench on Treasury matters.
Yeah.
And she was fierce in her during that interim period when she was doing that job. We were in opposition, and she'd been Education Secretary in Heath's government, and she was fierce in the chamber, but fierce not in a silly way, not in a histrionic way. She just eyed the enemy, as it were, concentrated on their defects, and that impressed me, because in opposition in particular, you need a leader who fights and who has some charisma that can appeal, not immediately, but over a period of time, to the wider public. Much more difficult when you're in opposition. Somebody once famously said, when you're in government, you wake up in the morning, you say, what shall I do today? When you're in opposition, you wake up in the morning, you say, what shall I say today?
Absolutely.
That's all opposition parties can do.
The previous Conservative government, the Heath government, had done this U-turn halfway through the government. It changed its policies in 1972. There was a very strong feeling that she was not going to turn around. There was not going to be a U-turn with her. She therefore felt it was important to establish a philosophical basis to the party, and she commissioned research groups and she brought in intellectuals. Do you think that it was important that she did that? I mean, either to her, I think obviously it was important to her. Was it important overall that she had that philosophical grounding?
Yeah, I think that was crucial. And you've got to remember the context. She originally hadn't intended to stand against Heath. It was going to be Keith Joseph. But they both shared the view, as did a growing number of people in the Conservative Party and perhaps in the wider country, that the sort of almost consensus between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, that all the big changes Labour had made after the Second World War and the Attlee government had to be permanent. The nationalised industries, the way in which the health service was run, the way in which education was dealt with, there was a sort of unwritten assumption that couldn't be changed too much. Now, they came to the view, Joseph, Thatcher and others, and then such was the situation, Joseph ruled himself out. And she, very bravely, because at that time a woman to stand for the leadership of the party sounded almost, unorthodox to say the least. And that was part of her actual attraction, that she was breaking the mould in a very visible way and obviously enjoying doing it.
Yes. Now, her leadership qualities, you've already said you thought some of her decisions were good, you thought some of them were disastrous. But what you did know with Margaret Thatcher was exactly what she thought. And even more striking to me is that she knew what she thought. She never had to hesitate about what her position was on any matter, because having very sound principles, some of them you might think were a bit crude, but having some very sound principles, she always knew what her opinion was. And I've admired that greatly.
Yes, but remember, there's two kinds of politicians, the conviction politicians and the pragmatists. Now, she loved being considered a conviction politician, but she could be incredibly pragmatic.
I agree.
When it suited her. If she realised that the convictions side of her wasn't working, she wouldn't admit to that, but she would so mould the policy to actually make it more workable. And that was her strength. And it was her strength for most of her prime ministership. But, when prime ministers are in power for too long, they become convinced of their own omniscience, that because their judgment has been remarkably good in the early years, they think it remains that way. And I think she was not unique in being a prime minister who stayed in power perhaps just a little bit too long.
On the other hand, if you listed her achievements, would you say that it was a longer list than most prime ministers can claim?
Oh, massively long. I mean, I think apart from Churchill, who's a wartime prime minister, I think she will go down historically as the most important and successful prime minister of the 20th century. Blair has some of that charisma and has some achievements from a Labour government point of view. But I don't think in terms of changing Britain in the way she changed it, whether it was the economy, whether it was taxation, whether it was the nationalised industries, and of course the Falklands made her a world leader as well. And the Gorbachev, I was present when she met Mikhail Gorbachev. And what was extraordinary, this convinced communist, as Gorbachev still was, and Thatcher, a capitalist and a Western Democrat, they took to each other as if this was the most exciting moment in their lives. I was sitting across the table, not listening. I shouldn't have been listening, but I could hear their conversation through the interpreter, and they saw, each of them saw the strengths that they admired in them and hoped the public would admire in themselves in the other person.
And I suppose probably the biggest change in my lifetime has been the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain. And do you think that she is largely responsible for that?
Well, she is responsible in this sense. I mean, we mustn't overdo Britain's influence even under Thatcher. It was greater than it had been ever since the Churchill days and including the present day. Why? Because she had established this personal relationship with Ronald Reagan. So when she famously came out of number 10 and said about Gorbachev, I think he's a man with whom we can do business. And this was at the height of the Cold War, and he was still a convinced communist. That's something that Reagan took account of. Normally, he would have said, why should I speak to this new communist leader? We've had Andropov, Chernenko, they're all ghastly people. If Thatcher believes he's worth talking to, I better talk to him as well. And that's how she helped change history, because she not only persuaded him to make the contact with Gorbachev, but she then became Reagan's almost senior advisor as to how to handle Gorbachev and how to take things forward. It was an advisory role. She couldn't tell him what to do, except it may have sounded like that, given her own particular personality.
I don't know whether you've seen it. I just recommend to you the documentary that's been made about Brian Walden and
I've just watched it.
Margaret Thatcher. And the reason is that, you know, people nowadays may not know that there was ever such a thing as a long-form...
Absolutely. I was interviewed by Brian Walden on a couple of occasions. I was a much more junior minister, of course, in the Foreign Office. But it is a deep sadness that either the BBC or other channels do not exercise that judgment that the public will be not necessarily impressed with the individual,
maybe it's
impressed by the format.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed to Malcolm Rifkind. Coming up, energy bills went up in January and are expected to rise again in April. But Energy Secretary Ed Miliband maintains that the government will bring bills down by up to £300 by 2030 as Labour push on with net zero. I'll be speaking to the CEO of Energy UK about what's going on in the industry. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. There are some glimmers of sunshine around first thing today, but for many it is still rather cloudy, all due to the easterly wind that is setting itself back up, filtering in quite a lot of moisture from the North Sea, and that's providing quite extensive cloud cover, particularly across eastern areas where we will see outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times. Generally, though, if you're further towards the west, you've got a greater chance of seeing some sunshine today, particularly for northwestern Scotland. It's going to be another fine, lovely day here. Western areas of Wales, down towards Devon and Cornwall, the Scilly Isles should also see some sunshine at points today. But that easterly wind is going to continue to feed in that cloud, and so sunshine will become increasingly limited later on in the day, and we'll see some longer spells of rain arriving into southeastern England later on as well. Temperatures on the thermometer will be around 6 to 8 degrees Celsius, but again, we've got to factor in that easterly wind that is going to make it feel colder than these temperatures will show on the chart. Across northwestern Scotland, where we do hold on to the sunshine, certainly it will be a nice fine end to the day, but underneath the clear skies that hold on tonight, it is going to turn quite chilly. Again, there will be some frost around, maybe some freezing fog patches as well. And elsewhere, where temperatures do get close towards freezing, there could be some very localised icy stretches where surfaces remain wet and untreated. But for most of our towns and cities, temperatures will be around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. As we start off this new working week, then, it is going to be a fairly dull, damp, dreary one, unfortunately. Again, a lot of extensive cloud cover right across the board, continuing to see some showers push their way in from the east. They'll be wintry over higher ground as well. It's always going to be western sides of things that will see the best of the sunshine. Again, northwestern Scotland probably seeing the best day out of everywhere. Temperatures really struggling though, 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Again, we've got to factor in the strength of the wind, so it's probably going to feel closer towards freezing, and that is going to continue right throughout the forthcoming week. Bye-bye.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So as we sit in Captain Tom's room, how has this whole experience left you in terms of financially and also mentally?
Thank you for asking the question, because the reality is that this has been devastating on a personal level, emotionally, financially. To have a reputation that you build up over decades and it can be demolished so quickly, that's exactly what's happened.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. This week, Sir Keir Starmer announced plans to make it easier to construct mini nuclear power stations. Comes in the same week that the government relaunched the Net Zero Council. The council is tasked with ensuring that the clean energy transition drives economic growth and creates jobs. After energy bills rose in January and are expected to rise again in April, is the government's pledge that energy costs will come down by up to £300 by 2030 achievable. Ed Miliband, the Net Zero Cabinet Minister, says that he supports the government as it invites Heathrow to apply again to build a third runway, which he had opposed. Can he stay in position if the government permits the development of the enormous Rosebank oil field? Joining me now is the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, very nice to see you. Welcome to GB News. Let's begin with a couple of those questions. There is this enormous oil field, 240 million barrels. When I was in the Department of Energy, we were producing about 100 million barrels in total a year, so that would be 2.5 years supply on that basis. It's a big field. Prime Minister seems to want to develop it. Do you think it will go ahead?
Yes, I think it will now. I think that there's far too much emotion gets into this debate and far too much sort of philosophical views as well. And the reality is that we are a country that requires oil and gas. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we take it out of our North Sea, or do we, I don't know, bring it in from Qatar, bring it in from the US, bring it in from farther afield than either of those two? And the only common sense thing to do is to use our own resources and to use them wisely, and to put to one side, as I say, some of these theoretical views which says, oh, well, we can somehow manage on wind alone or sun alone, all of which is a load of rubbish.
The Prime Minister has said that oil and gas is going to be part of our energy make-up for some years to come. Can you put some shape to that? How long do you think we're going to be using oil and gas in this country?
Well, it's difficult to see whether we will ever get to a point in which we won't use oil and gas. That pledge which says net zero is net zero. It doesn't mean that everything goes to zero. And when you consider exactly how many things one requires oil or gas for, it is very difficult to see that there is any sensible option other than to, yes, by all means, minimise our consumption, but you can't remove it altogether. I mean, look at the whole plastics industry, for one. There's the whole pharmaceutical industry. All of this has some relationship, either directly or arm's length.
And not to mention lubricants. I mean, even electric cars use oil.
Absolutely, absolutely. So does my central heating, by the way.
Can you see a situation in which our electricity prices are going to come down by 2030?
No, I always thought that that was one of those pledges which was ridiculous to make. I don't like to use the word lie, but there is something pretty close to it. And there's more than one reason for that. Because every time you build something like an offshore wind farm, a renewable, of course, the wind only blows for a certain period of time, so you have to build the backup. So therefore, the cost, if you like, to us as consumers and to industry as consumers is not just the cost of the wind farm, it's the cost of the backup. So you have to pay twice. Now,
and also, in order to get people to build a wind farm, the government has to promise them a price, which holds for 15 years.
Yeah,
and it looks like that price has got to be quite high to be attractive at the moment.
It's called a contract for difference. And so that is the price that they are paid, regardless whether the overall price of the wholesale is down or whether it's up. But another aspect, or perhaps two more aspects I could add to this. The first is, of course, you've got to make massive, massive investment in the grid, because where the wind farms are and not where the coal-fired power stations used to be. And so that means that there is this whole big infrastructure requirement, which again is something like 20, 30 billion, that has to be put into the grid. And a lot of that's going to be overground. So if you live in East Anglia, you're going to get really upset because the wind farms are off the east coast. The consumption, of course, isn't. So you've got to bring all that power in. So that's one big investment that somehow never gets costed in. The other is a more complicated thing, and it's called how we calculate the wholesale price of electricity in this country. Think of it as a pool, and every single a power generator is connected to that pool. Now, at any one period of time, the consumption of the UK, is calculated on a half-hour basis. And the number of generators required to meet that consumption, of course, are drawn from the pool. The price is set by the last generator required to meet demand, which is always going to be the most expensive.
Right.
So in some respects, it doesn't matter how much cheap stuff you connect to the pool, it's the expensive stuff that's going to fix the price. Redo the algorithm, I say. You don't have to leave it like it stands.
That's very interesting. That's a complicated point, but it is actually fundamental to why our electricity prices in Britain, I think, are the top anywhere for industry and very high indeed for domestic consumers. Just lastly, what is the scale of this challenge and who ought to be responsible for managing the challenge that we face?
Well, the scale of the challenge, I think, is much bigger than people think, because whilst it might be slightly excessive to say it's another industrial revolution, it is of that order of magnitude. And when you've got something like this, which is a huge, expensive engineering challenge, I'm afraid politicians are probably not the right people to be in charge. And when I've looked at the qualifications of the various secretaries of states and ministers that we've had to do with energy, it's all things like history and PPE and all those. You don't have anybody who's done anything to do with engineering. I can't remember that there was even a scientist involved. So to my mind, what the political environment should do is by all means set a general direction. But as part of that general direction, it's got to be sensible in timing and sensible in how much it costs. Who pays how much and for what are the three big questions that nobody has answered, and Ed Miliband looks like he's got absolutely no intention of answering them whatsoever.
A former minister talking to a former minister about the lack of qualifications of ministers. Thank you very much indeed, Angela Wright. Coming up, Stefan Kyriazis joins us much more to share what he's enjoyed on his travels through the West End this week. First, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
You may well be thinking of escaping the cloudy skies of the UK and heading to the Mediterranean, though it is rather mixed out there at the moment. There are some heavy showers and thunderstorms across parts of Malta and Sicily, though recent snowfall across the Alps should hopefully help with some skiing conditions. Perhaps the most settled conditions across parts of southern Iberia, Portugal and Spain, though there is some showery rain pushing into parts of Madeira as well. Generally, it is going to be the west that holds on to the most settled conditions during this week as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
First, mate, we had lockdowns. Then we had soaring energy costs. Then we had a hike in national insurance for employers. Then we had soaring wage costs. And now the government expects people like you to monitor what people say in boozers. And if you don't, you might get sued. I bet you feel like saying cheers to them, don't you?
look, it just looks like another war on pubs. You know, remember they tried to stop smoking outside as well. Luckily, they rethought that. But look, we've got everything stacked against us, Martin. And the last thing I need to do is go and get in people's conversations. At the end of the day, a pub is like an extension to your home. You know, it's a public house. Friends go to speak. Friends go to meet, unwind after work. It's none of my business what you're talking about. Any good publican, and myself included, anyone that was rude to anyone or on purpose, they want to offend people or they want to dig people out, antagonise them, of course I'm going to step in and say, behave yourself or you go. But look, how can I be on social media talking about everything, transgender, immigration, and people not be allowed to do that at the bar or do that at the table of a pub? It's ridiculous. And these ministers really do need to sort of look at this legislation and see where it could lead, because I'm not going to stop anyone speaking in my pub. Again, if they're trying to antagonise people or they're rude or trying to start trouble, they get thrown out the front door, and any publican worth their salt is going to do that as well. But we're not there to police people's conversations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Stefan Kyriazis joins me now to talk about his latest West End adventures. It's been a tragic week for you.
It has been.
And it's been a Greek week.
It's been a Greek tragic week. And I would say, based on there's two Sophoclean dramas with two Hollywood Oscar winners in the leads, and I would say, based on this, the Greeks are going to be wanting more than their marbles back, Michael, quite frankly. Two very modern performances, two very modern shows with sort of performance art staging, no intervals, straight through. First up, we've got Oedipus, and we've just had an Oedipus with Mark Strong and Leslie Manville, which was done as a modern political thriller and was fantastic.
Yes, I remember your enthusiasm about that.
This one I was very excited about because it's a mix of the writer Ella Hickson and Hofesh Shekhter, who's an Israeli choreographer, has his own dance company, stunning modern dance. Yeah, there's some pictures popping up there. And we've got a little bit of a behind-the-scenes video to have a look at what was going on. Give you a little bit idea of the mood before I get tragic.
Let's see that. Lots of exciting movement there.
Yeah, so
and I recognise Rami Malek.
Yes, so this is Rami Malek, famous for playing Freddie Mercury, a very mannered, sort of slightly awkward actor. And this starts with all this beautiful dance, all this, it's very angular lighting, sort of graphic look to the staging. And it starts with this swirling dance, blacking in and out. It's beautiful. And at the end, they all disperse. And there's Rami kind of undulating sinuously. Fantastic. And it kind of all goes downhill from there. He's a little bit overstudied and mannered. He's doing some strange sort of elongated vowel drawl thing, and he's very kind of awkward in his body language, which is his usual way. He's opposite Indira Varma, magnificent actress, but for me recently a little bit too clipped, too patrician, too posh. They have absolutely zero chemistry. So this is the story.
That's sad.
Well, it's essential. This is the Prince of Thebes, who is deeply in love with his wife, has children. He had been the Prince of Corinth, but left when he was told he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother. So he fled to avoid that fate, to live happily ever after. and then it all goes horribly, tragically, horrendously wrong. But you have to believe in their love. You have to absolutely be destroyed when the blows come. And I felt absolutely nothing, which is a shame. And this dance is incredible, but it is absolutely half of the stage time. It's only an hour and 40 total, so it leaves you less than 50 minutes for the actual acting. And you get a bit of dance, a bit of acting, a bit of dance, a bit of acting, and it becomes very episodic. No chemistry between those two. It just feels a little bit too concept-y, and the dance doesn't move the narrative enough, which is a shame, because it's beautiful.
Yeah, OK. That's a very, very clear review. How many stars is that? So two or three?
I gave that one 2. There's been a few 3s, but it was a 2. There's some beautiful ideas in it, some very clever ideas, beautiful visuals and lighting.
So Oedipus is the Old Vic, is it?
So that's on at the Old Vic until March. And then we have another one, which is Electra. So this is the big, raging, angry princess. And this is regarded as the Sophocles with the most action and the most kind of pulsing drive to a show. Now, this is Brie Larson, massive Hollywood star, Oscar winner again for Room, but also very big Marvel kind of cinematic superhero star now as well. This is her first stage performance. She's changed everything. You'll see when we have a look at this little clip. I was very excited about it. She can tell us about it, and then I'll tell you what I think.
With shame, with a name made nameless. Oh, child.
I think that our process has been really unique because we're taking a Greek tragedy. These plays didn't have specific locations and sets. We are kind of honoring that in our own way by doing it in an empty theater, along with some other contemporary items like a blimp. We have a revolve, so the stage has a circle in it that turns, and very simple lighting cues. And it really, I think, allows the performances to be the thing that you are focused on.
Well, I can't wait to hear. What do you think?
Bold, shaved her head. She is basically in jeans on stage in a sleeveless T-shirt. And then here we go, as always, it's Daniel Fish is the director. Now, he did a very divisive Oklahoma, which absolutely split audiences, and I fell very firmly on one side of that, but thrilled lots of people. So she has a microphone all the way through. You can see the staging. There you go. That is the staging. She constantly just walks around with a microphone, and she's telling you how angry she is, how annoyed she is. She is playing Electra. Her mum, Clytemnestra, has killed her father, Agamemnon. And she did that because Agamemnon killed their other child. But Electra cannot forgive. And she basically stomps around. And for me, it was like a sort of naughty performance poet it was very monotone, except every time she says the word no, so she would say, I don't think so. No, I'm not going to do that. There's no mercy for anyone that says we're no forgive. And it just sings the word no every time. And occasionally picks up another microphone.
I'm enjoying your performance.
It's marvellous. Well, I don't have the vocoder, so a bit like Cher's distorted voice, we get a bit of that. There's the Zeppelin above, which we think is possibly to do with war. There is a Mickey Mouse puppet nailed to the back of the wall, which is probably a snide dig at Disney and Marvel. And it just is, it's performance art to the nth degree. That chorus is fantastic, beautiful. I loved it, but they're doing all the storytelling. I just didn't feel anything. I didn't care. It was frustrating. I kind of didn't know what was going on.
Where should people not see it?
This is on at the Duke of York's until April the 12th. This really is dividing audiences. It's a shame.
Thank you very much. It's a shame that we end with that. Thank you very much, Stefan Kyriazis. That concludes the first hour of Sunday with Mike Portillo. Please rejoin me at noon. My panel will discuss the ethics of pulling down the remains of Grenfell Tower in London, scene of the horrific fire in 2017. The founder of Film Without Borders, Jill Samuels, will talk to you about the October the 7th tax. We'll be talking about President Trump's global market tariffs, and we'll also be eating pizzas because it is National Pizza Day. Sunday with Mike Portillo. Come back soon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front.
Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. This is your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. We are in a quite stagnant weather situation at the moment. High pressure that has set itself up across Scandinavia is essentially acting as a blocking system and leading to a very similar weather pattern day in, day out at the moment. It's an easterly wind that set itself up, and that is providing a lot of moisture and a lot of cloud feeding in from the North Sea, with some outbreaks of rain and showers around as well. Some wintry flakes falling over higher ground routes, particularly the Pennines and the Grampians. If you are further towards the west, there'll be a few clearer spells this evening and overnight, particularly for northwestern Scotland, where it will turn quite chilly, maybe as low as -5, -6 degrees Celsius, but underneath the cloud elsewhere, temperatures will be holding up more around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. Despite that very chilly start across northwestern Scotland on Monday, though, it is here where we're going to see the most lengthy spells of sunshine right throughout the day. Once again, for the Highlands, the Outer Hebrides, parts of Argyll and Bute, it is going to be quite a lovely, fine day. Elsewhere, cloud is going to be plaguing us, very grey and dull skies. Again, further outbreaks of rain and showers around, falling as snow once again, particularly for the Peak District and the Pennines. Tomorrow we could see a few centimetres building up during the day. We do then also have to factor in the strength of that easterly wind that will be increasing on Monday, so that's going to make it feel particularly cold. Very biting wind that, whilst temperatures on the thermometer will be around 5-6 degrees Celsius at best, it is actually going to feel more like freezing when you add on the strength of that wind, so certainly is a day to be wrapping up warm when you are outside. Generally, things stay very similar into the evening period, and actually that stagnant weather situation is going to continue for a good portion of this forthcoming week. So expect particularly eastern areas to be cloudier overall. Generally in the west, you've got a greater chance of seeing a touch more sunshine around, but temperatures still below average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good afternoon, or should I wish you a happy posterior of this day? An expression used by Shakespeare in Love's Labour's Lost in place of afternoon. He thought the word afternoon was reserved for the rude multitude, and that would not describe GB News viewers with us now. For the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo, where we'll continue to discuss ethics, culture, current affairs and food. Grenfell Tower was a 24-storey tower block built in the 1970s and destroyed by a fire on the 14th of June 2017, killing 72 people. The skeleton of the tower has remained, but the government has now decided to pull it down. What are the ethics of destroying this reminder of the dead and of official failure? My panel will deliberate. Each Saturday, we watch Israeli hostages being released by Hamas as part of the fragile ceasefire deal in Gaza. 3 very emaciated men were released yesterday. Jill Samuels, who's been in Israel with the hostage families as events have unfolded, will join me to discuss her film about the October the 7th attacks. President Trump is unleashing tariffs against countries across the world while showing willingness to cut deals. Professor of US politics David Dunn will join me to talk about how the new president's economic policy is shaping the world and affecting us. And in celebration of National Pizza Day, food content creator Hannah Harley-Young will join me with a selection of the Italian staple. Yummy. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Winsler.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. 5 Thai men held hostage in Gaza for over a year have arrived back in their homeland. There were tears of joy at Bangkok airport as the men reunited with their families and said they feel so grateful. The men, aged 27 to 36, were released by Hamas on the 30th of January as part of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It comes a day after they handed over 3 Israeli hostages whose gaunt appearances shocked Israelis, and Israel freed dozens of Palestinian prisoners. Back in the UK, the Prime Minister has sacked one of his health ministers over offensive comments he's reported to have made in a WhatsApp group. Andrew Gwynn has also been suspended as a member of the Labour Party and has since apologised for what he calls misjudged comments. It follows an exposé by the Mail on Sunday claiming Mr Gwynn reportedly made anti-Semitic comments and joked about a pensioner constituent, saying he hoped she died before the next election. It's also alleged that he attacked members of his own party, including making racist slights towards Labour MP Diane Abbott and sexist comments towards Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook praised Sir Keir Starmer for acting decisively.
Comments made by Andrew Gwynn are completely unacceptable. That this is going to be a government that upholds the highest standards of conduct in public life. We're a government in service of working people, so we've taken decisive action to dismiss Andrew Gwynn as a minister, as is the case. There's a live investigation going on in terms of the Labour Party. Andrew Gwynn's been administratively suspended. He's lost the Labour whip. I don't know what was said in those WhatsApp groups. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chancellor Alex Burkhardt said Andrew Gwynn's comments just show Sir Keir Starmer hasn't got a hold of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party.
The worst thing that I've seen Mr Gwynn say on that group was that one gentleman was too Jewish. Now, Keir Starmer claims that he's gotten on top of this problem in the Labour Party, but he clearly hasn't. We need to know who else was on that group. Did they call Andrew Gwynn out when he said that? If not, what sanctions are going to be taken against them? You know, we need all of this out in the open as quickly as possible, because otherwise it's the same old Labour, same old anti-Semitism within the left in this country, and you know, it shows that Labour hasn't changed at all.
In other news, the parents of 2 girls killed in the Southport knife attack say they're looking for light in the darkness. Speaking to the Sunday Times, 7-year-old Elsie Stankum and 6-year-old BB King's families remembered their daughters as confident, happy and intelligent. They opened up about their children's funerals and the support of their communities in the months since the horrendous attack. Alice da Silva Aguiar also lost her life that day. Prince Harry and Meghan cheered and clapped as the United Kingdom's team walked on the stage for the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in Canada. The couple arrived in Vancouver yesterday for the 7th edition of the Games, which were established by Prince Harry back in 2014. Their public appearance comes just hours after Donald Trump confirmed he won't move to deport the Duke of Sussex. Speaking in an interview, the US president said, "I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife." Meanwhile, it's been reported Donald Trump has confirmed that he's talked to Vladimir Putin on the phone to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. According to the Telegraph newspaper, the US president said that he believes the Russian leader does care about the number of people being killed. Mr. Trump told the New York Post Putin wants to see people stop dying. In the interview, which the newspaper said took place on board Air Force One on Friday, Mr. Trump said that he had better not say when asked how many times the two leaders have spoken, but he did confirm they maintain a good relationship. And train passengers will face significant disruption today as Avanti West Coast managers stage a fresh strike over rest day working. Members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union will walk out today, significantly impacting services on one of the UK's busiest rail routes. Avanti West Coast strongly advises passengers to avoid travelling if possible. Meanwhile, a limited service will operate today, with trains running only between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michael.
Thank you, Sophia Wensler. Some survivors of the fire at the Grenfell Tower and some relatives of those who died have objected to the government's plan to demolish the wreckage, which still rises 24 stories. Are they right to fear that they will be forgotten by the authorities once the grim reminder has been felled? Is there any point in keeping it? Should the bereaved have a veto? To discuss those ethical issues, my panel has regrouped pollster and director at JL Partners, Scarlett Maguire, journalist and broadcaster Candice Holsworth, and former Conservative Special Advisor and Chief of Staff to Nadeem Zahawi, James Price. Scarlett, what's your reaction to this? I mean, do you, for example, feel that they have a point when they say that when this terrible eyesore has been removed, the authorities will find it easier to forget about them?
I think it's a very natural and understandable impulse to want to leave some mark of it. I mean, you know, and it's happened throughout history. So when the Persians invaded the Greeks actually swore an oath in the Battle of Plataea that saying any sanctuaries that the Persians destroy, we will keep up for future generations to remind them of the loss that the country endured, but also of the impiety of the Persians. And so I think it's a very, very natural instinct to want to say, no, we want to leave some sort of monument that people cannot forget, that people cannot ignore, firstly to honour the lives of those who are lost, but also crucially to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I think this is the point here, which is whether or not there is a need to tear down the building, which I believe that there may be. I think the fact that people be so upset about it reflects the desperation that people feel. And again, when I want to talk about polling, when you poll people don't have any faith in the ability of governments to prevent something like Grenfell happening again. And so if you're at a point where there's no trust in politicians to look after people and to ensure that they are protected from these sorts of heinous events, and also to provide and make sure that people are adequately housed in places that are safe and livable in, which is also not even just a fire safety point, then it's no wonder that people will want to keep anything up that tries to make sure that it's always on people's minds.
James, what's your reaction?
I think I understand that desire to want to have something stay there and be memorialised. We put up gravestones, Scarlett makes a great reference there. And I'm also against, as you would be from Antigone in Sophocles, against desecration, against this idea of tearing these things down. And it's a very fraught moment when that happens. I think after the Second World War, there were various gravestones of Nazis with swastikas and things on that were smashed up. You're seeing it today in El Salvador, that there's been a law that the gravestones have to be smashed up that have gang signs on there. And so this stuff does elicit very strong strong emotions. But I think that it being such an unpleasant reminder looming over people quite literally in a sort of prime bit of real estate almost, when there's a housing crisis, I think there's a point about that land perhaps being better used. I think the fact that it's also quite expensive to keep it up right now and it's not entirely safe still standing, there's something to be said for it coming down there, unless you go fully the other way, like you see in somewhere like Auschwitz, where, you know, actually a lot of money is spent to maintain those horrible sites so that future generations can learn from them. And I don't think we should be, you know, opening this up as an exhibit for people to go in and see, to learn those lessons. I don't think that's the right way to do it either.
Did you in passing say there that one of the reasons to bring it down is that it's unpleasant for the rest of us?
Not unpleasant in the sense of, oh, I don't want to have to think about it, but in terms of the height of this thing and having to live in the shadow of something and worry that it may be coming down at some point because is it entirely unstable, that's not itself a healthy place perhaps to raise families again. And so I think you can make the right point of memorialising something without it being, you know, a kind of constant fear again. I don't think it's right for normal people living nearby to have to think about it in the same way that the government and officials should keep having to think about it.
Candice, if you were in charge, would it have come down some time ago, do you think?
I think you have to follow the natural evolution of how people feel about these things, and I do think it's about feelings. I mean, at one point it was sort of a stark, very poignant point, and I remember driving past us in a car with people, and we saw it, and we said, "That's Grenfell." And everyone sort of went quiet. You know, it really did. It had that power. But I think now, following on from James's point, which I actually do agree with, I think we have to allow for an evolution of feelings on the matter. And I think some sort of memorial. I would have a memorial there.
Who's to judge these feelings?
Well,
does the victim community, as it were, have a veto?
That's such a good point, because they are the ones who are obviously going to feel the absolute worst about it, because they're the ones who suffered. But I think we also have to consider the wider community as well. It's very true. You know, people living around us, normal people, should they have a place of beauty where they can go and reflect? So it's so true. There's so many different people that you have to balance out when you talk about this issue. And I think we do have to think about the future, and I think we do have to allow for some restoration and some rebirth at some point in that area. I don't think that you can lock everyone in those feelings. I think that's wrong, personally.
Scott, I think we're coming to the point there. Should victimhood, the experience of being a victim, should it be prolonged? I mean, should people aspire to get over what's happened as fast as they can to return to some sort of normality? Or, on the other hand, is it right to encourage them to continue to think about the thing? And do we understand in that context why they might want to keep the tower there?
I think, in a general sense, my personal instinct is that as a society as a whole, it doesn't do anyone any favours to want to prolong any state of victimhood. Anything that I've come across in my life, which is nothing like Grenfell, but, you know, a few things. I've always found that the best thing for me, from the people around me and from society in general, is to expect me to be able to pick up and be able to move forward whilst acknowledging that whatever happened might have been unpleasant, might have had terrible consequences. So I prefer a thrust towards trying to get better. However, I do think it comes into tension again when we're left with the very real consequences of Grenfell. So, you know, lots of people trapped in homes with dangerous cladding. Now, that's not just bad because it's a fire risk and they may lose their lives, which is absolutely awful, but it's also bad because they are stuck in homes in which they cannot sell, in which often they cannot mortgage. And having been someone that's been trapped in a home like that for very different reasons, I was flooded before, I feel quite strongly that actually I can see why there's a desire to keep this in public memory, given that a lot of the time, if you don't make it a pressing issue all the time, politicians tend to move on and forget about it and ignore and pretend it's not happening, which I don't think is the same as prolonging a state of victimhood, which, again, as I was saying, I think, you know, these things presumably cannot be rushed, but the thing about life is that you have to try at least and expect those around you to be able to move forward and help them do it. But with this, I do think, as I said, there are issues if there are causes which are not being addressed.
James, fairly briefly, is there a certain inequality between people who die terribly and in accidents and possibly because of official neglect, but die in ones and twos and therefore are hardly acknowledged, and those who die, in this case, 72 at a time? So, of course, we're very focused on them. But I wonder if there's an inequality built in there.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You know, if it's avoidable deaths, say, in the NHS. As you say, they happen all the time, and it's very upsetting, and someone like Jeremy Hunt tried very hard to stamp down on that. But if there's not a physical, visceral reminder of it, it's difficult. And I think that speaks to a wider point about how much buildings and monuments, things affect us. I think Churchill said that we create and sculpt buildings, and thereafter they create and sculpt us, which is why it's so upsetting when you see, as a more broad point, the physical infrastructure and environment around us being ugly and unpleasant. So we should have, when we build new things, whether it's new houses, new infrastructure, make it look beautiful, and that will improve our lives as we go along.
Candice, I don't know whether you've been to New York, but you've probably seen photographs of the memorial to the Twin Towers. Do you think New York has got it right?
I do. Another memorial that I find very beautiful, also people who died in a fire, was the King's Cross fire. And I love that memorial with the shards of light. You can actually create something very beautiful and something that really touches people and something very philosophical and something that points the way towards the future. Not something empty, something people can always connect with. And I think it's so important to think about beauty. I think humans have a deep, deep, deep need for beauty. And I think that's one of the things that Grenfell has taught us. Is that the right way to be housing people? I personally don't think so.
Thank you very much indeed, panel. Most interesting, Scarlett Maguire, Candice Holdsworth, James Price. Coming up, I'll be joined by the filmmaker Jill Samuels, who's been at the heart of the most recent hostage releases in Israel. She'll be discussing her film Saving Dror next. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data, but it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win, at least they got the story right, but before it had happened. So what it seems to happen is that the AI farms existing stories, and what it has done, that's the alert. We can see the alert there now, and it also claiming that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal had come out as gay when actually a different Brazilian tennis player was actually mentioned in the original story. So what it does is you see that's branded as BBC Sport. What the Apple AI system does is it farms alerts that it thinks people are getting from the source and then summarises them into one alert.
Looks to me like you would assume, OK, the BBC are reporting this.
Absolutely.
So the BBC News might be saying something else.
So it could happen to any news organisation.
This has highlighted a massive issue. I mean, having editorial judgment and quality control, because if this is going on, it's just contributing to the flow of misinformation. Yes. And we know that this is a problem on social media, people reporting false things. But if it seems to come from trusted news sources, that is a massive issue in credibility. I mean, if you had something like Reuters, who's a big news provider, doing this, you could hold people accountable, you could make changes, but when it's the AI doing it, I mean, what do? You're going to have to reprogram it in some way.
And if you just lost control, if you're a news source, you've lost control of what goes out, because it basically farms it, puts your logo on it and sends it out, even when it's nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News, 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We are proud
proud to be GB News, the People Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. A fragile ceasefire is currently in place in Gaza. Over the past few weekends, we've seen hostages abducted in Israel released from the group of Hamas. Many were shocked by the emaciated condition of those who were paraded yesterday by Hamas prior to being handed over. Israel has released large numbers of Palestinian prisoners from its jails. My next guest has been present at such hostage releases, working with families in the heart of Israel. She's also made a film about the October 7th attacks. Jill Samuels joins me now. Welcome to GB News. First of all, you were in Israel before and on the date of October the 7th.
Absolutely.
What was it like?
Well, first of all, what people don't realise, because it's never reported, is that there are tons of rockets coming over to Israel, more than I've seen in years. And this isn't a normal life. Children with women with babies, have to run down 10 flights of stairs. You've got 90 seconds. So before the build-up to this, there were rockets, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock. I have no idea why it was allowed to go on so long. In England, can you imagine over your house, all these rockets coming? It wouldn't happen. And then just a few days before, a week before, I can tell you there was this stressful atmosphere. No one could put their finger on it. It was heavy. It was very heavy. It's as if someone knew something was going to happen, but obviously no one could even think of something like this.
No.
But it was awful, yeah.
Tell me about the film that you've made.
I made a film. I started when I was there and the war... but this is all before the war, which is very important. It's on the hostages. When the hostage taking happened, I woke up in the morning, I thought I was in a Die Hard film or something. There were people flying in, people doing this. Everything was everywhere. And I tell you what was amazing. The young people in the country, the young girls, started to run that country. And the one thing about Israel is when there's the worst disaster in the world, it kicks in. Yeah. Amazing. So suddenly I was taken to a drop-off centre to help there. And Ethiopians and Thai and Filipino and everyone who had nothing were dropping off clothes. The people had to be moved out of the south. Everyone was traumatised. Total shock. Horrific. And then you saw people kissing their little boys, who are little boys going into the army, the girls going back to the army. People all around the world came in. The Christians came in. The cowboys from Montana came in. Indians came in to help. People came in to help. It was incredible, not obviously with the army, with the agriculture, but what they did in that country. And then in 48 hours, they set up something called the Forum for Hostage Families. Again, someone donated a building. In 24 hours, this was set up. The whole campaign, Bring Me Home campaign, which is now worldwide, set up through this. All manned by volunteers. For every kind of need that these hostages need. Everything.
How did that lead you to make a film?
Well, because I started taking testimonies. It's the best thing I knew of people. And it was just to me like my parents' stories of the Holocaust. It was horrendous and disgusting and vile. And everyone was the same worst story. And I thought, I've got to do something with footage. And I came across this wonderful man who'd lost so many of his family. And he didn't hate. Because no one realises, before, when the kibbutzes were born, there weren't borders, so everyone was friendly. He grew up, his parents were friendly, the Gardens came to Israel, these people they helped, they'd been in their house, they had jobs on the kibbutzes. These were their friends. And so this was an extraordinary man who had lost a lot of family and he had spent his whole time trying to save the life of his daughter, not once, but twice from Hamas.
Yes.
And that was an incredible story, and I thought it was important to have one who didn't hate.
That is very interesting. How does one see the film?
Well, it's very interesting. I wouldn't fund it through anybody. I wasn't going to have the BBC telling me I couldn't call it terrorists for some ridiculous reason. Ridiculous. I wasn't going to have someone else tell me this. I paid for it, so no one can say it's biased. No one can say they've put money into it. My non-Jewish editor, Stan Moore, who's a really good editor, volunteered his services. Simon Hunt, again, non-Jewish. It was lovely in England to find non-Jewish people with all these stupid marches going on, all these people volunteering their services. Twickenham Studios gave me their services. And then I decided any money I make from this is going towards these people. I'm not earning a penny. So
towards these people, the hostages and their families?
It's the actual people who are hostages or came from the kibbutzes who mentally feel they can't go back after the rebuild. It's like going back to Auschwitz. They lost 10 members of their family. They mentally can't go back. And so it was interesting because they have no idea outside the kibbutz life. They went to a bank to get a mortgage. They've got nothing. The kibbutz, they get their salary paid for, everything's paid for, so they have no money. So this is to raise money for them to get a mortgage. There's a few people, a lot of people do want to go back. They love their life in the kibbutz. Everyone loved it. But the ones who mentally can't go back. And that was very important.
I'm not sure whether you said this. Where can we see the film?
Right. Well, I've decided... It went on Kenyan television. I'm doing it to every country that doesn't normally get it. Kenyan television had millions and millions and millions of viewers a few weeks ago. Filipino television's doing it in a few weeks. They had 4 people, unfortunately, who died, Filipinos who died in the attack, one of them died in the arms of the person she was looking after. It's on a streamer in America. Contact London, I don't know if you know Contact London, they did a whole thing of it and called it none of the top 10 films. I'm doing it very slowly. Rwanda showed it. That was very important to me. And it was for people 18 to 35 of the genocide.
People who'd experienced.
Yeah, they cried. They want to see it again. So it's going in theatres, it's going in cinemas, and it's on a streamer called Skyflix in America, Australia, New Zealand and Canada.
You have been very clear that you don't want to show the bodies of people. You don't want you...
Absolutely.
Yes. So, nonetheless, you create a sense of the absolute horror of that day, even though you don't see the bodies of the victims.
Yes. I think it was very important because people were so traumatised to show their children. For me personally, to show their children in that state, I interviewed Sagi in the hospital, and he was a traumatised, gaunt, traumatised man. He still is. I couldn't take advantage of that fact. That's what I felt. I also want it for schools, for museums, and people like that. But the one thing I came across, which is horrifying, is the United Nations, UNRWA. It took me into a world that I was so horrified by. I mean, you only have to look at the Red Cross the other day with the exchange of prisoners. How dare they have this show and shake hands with the head of the Hamas, the people? It was extraordinary.
What is it you've got to say about the United Nations agency working in Gaza?
I think the United Nations agency, they've been shielding people. They've had people... Look, in England, we have hospitals. We can't even get a bed in. We're sleeping on the floor. We've got water coming from the roof. We'll all be sitting with umbrellas. What does Keir Starmer do? He gives another £13 million to UNRWA, which is their buildings, which has been shielding. Their staff have been involved in the kidnap. They've got rockets in the bed. They've got rockets under the bed. I don't want my tax money going there. I've seen what's happening there with my own eyes. I want our tax money here. It is a disgrace he's done it. He knows about it. He was told about it by Emily, the girl who was shot twice in the leg, that she was held, she told him, in an UNRWA building. And then he's gone and paid 13 million of our tax money to terrorists. They're no more than terrorists, in my personal opinion.
May I ask for your reaction to the sight of the 3 hostages released yesterday? Eli Sharabi was one of them, looking very, very gaunt. His wife was murdered, his 2 children were murdered. He lost his brother in a failed hostage rescue attempt. What was your reaction? My reaction was total heartbreak, and I can cry now. I'm looking at the Holocaust. I'm looking at the Nike generation of Holocaust, because the Holocaust, a lot of kids now can't recognise it because they're wearing long coats, whatever. I never thought I'd see this in my life. It broke my heart, the gauntness, the tragic... It was just like looking at the Holocaust. And again, how dare the Red Cross allow these people in this condition to go on a stage and be told what to do? They weren't even safe to get out that car. None of them have been in that exchange. The Red Cross are there to protect the people. They should have said, no, it's not safe, we'll go somewhere else. They didn't. What they did do was they sat on the stage, shook hands with the man in charge of all this from Hamas. Let's have a cup of tea. It was horrific. And this was the The humiliation of the hostages, the display of these people in there.
It is a humiliation for every hostage, every Jew, every human being, because they weren't. This whole thing about being Jewish hostages, by the way, it was. We've got Muslims still there. We've got. This is international, interfaith, but no, because it was Israel, it's Jewish. What they did, is despicable. The whole world should look, because you know what? They say first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people, and this will come. So look, it's horrific.
Jill Samuels, thank you very much, and congratulations on your film. Coming up, President Trump is unleashing his new economic policy on the world in the form of tariffs. Professor David Dunn will join me to discuss what impact that's having across the globe. But first, news headlines from Sophia Wenster.
Michael, thank you. Your headlines at 12:30. The Prime Minister has sacked one of his health ministers over offensive comments he's reported to have made in a WhatsApp group. Andrew Gwynn has also been suspended as a member of the Labour Party and has since apologised for what he calls misjudged comments. It follows an expose by the Mail on Sunday claiming Mr Gwynn reportedly made anti-Semitic comments and joked about a pensioner constituent, saying he hoped she died before the next election. It's also alleged that he attacked members of his own party, including making racist slights towards Labour MP Diane Abbott and sexist comments towards Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. Meanwhile, Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook praised Sir Keir Starmer for acting decisively.
Comments made by Andrew Gwynn are completely unacceptable. That this is going to be a government that upholds the highest standards of conduct in public life. We're a government in service of working people, so we've taken decisive action to dismiss Andrew Gwynn as a minister, as is the case. There's a live investigation going on in terms of the Labour Party. Andrew Gwynn's been administratively suspended. He's lost the Labour whip. I don't know what was said in those WhatsApp groups. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment.
But Shadow Chancellor Alex Burghardt said Andrew Gwynn's comments just show Sir Keir Starmer hasn't got a hold of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
The worst thing that I've seen Mr Gwynn say on that group was that one gentleman was too Jewish. Now, Keir Starmer claims that he's gotten on top of this problem in the Labour Party, but he clearly hasn't. We need to know who else was on that group. Did they call Andrew Gwynn out when he said that? If not, what sanctions are going to be taken against them? You know, we need all of this out in the open as quickly as possible, because otherwise it's the same old Labour, same old anti-Semitism within the left in this country, and it shows that Labour hasn't changed at all.
In other news, the parents of two girls killed in the Southport knife attack say they're looking for light in the darkness. Speaking to the Sunday Times, 7-year-old Elsie Stankoom and 6-year-old BB King's families remembered their daughters as confident, happy and intelligent. They opened up about their children's funerals and the support of their communities in the months since that horrendous attack. Alice da Silva Aguiar also lost her life on that day. And Prince Harry and Meghan have cheered and clapped as the United Kingdom's team walked onto stage for the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in Canada. The couple arrived in Vancouver yesterday for the 7th edition of the Games, which were established by Prince Harry in 2014. Their public appearance comes just hours after Donald Trump confirmed he won't move to deport the Duke of Sussex. Speaking in an interview, the US president said, "I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife." Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. Some of us are still going to be hunting for that sunshine today, though there are a few glimmers for a lucky few of us. We've still got high pressure out towards Scandinavia that is feeding in this easterly wind across the UK, and because it's coming in from the North Sea, it's bringing in a lot of moisture and a lot of clouds. So particularly for eastern regions today, it is going to be widely cloudy, grey, dull and drab, unfortunately, with some outbreaks of rain that will be falling as snow potentially over some higher ground areas. If you are a little bit further towards the west, you've got a greater chance of seeing some sunshine today. So particularly areas of Cornwall, the outer Scilly, potentially parts of Pembrokeshire as well, should see some brightness in there. But for a lot of central eastern areas of England and Wales, that rain will be pushing its way in. But actually for northwestern areas of Scotland, this is where we're going to see some of the brightest skies today. A really nice fine day to come here despite a little bit of a chill in the air. And it is going to be feeling quite cold underneath the cloud, and with the easterly wind starting to pick up in strength later on this afternoon and overnight, that is going to be adding a wind chill factor in there once again. That cloud, though, as it spreads its way in, will reduce the amount of frost for most of us, but particularly for northwestern Scotland, where we hold on to the clearer skies, temperatures will drop off a touch more here. We could get as low as -5, -6 degrees Celsius in the most sheltered rural areas. Maybe some icy stretches around where surfaces are still wet due to all these showers that aren't pushing their way in. And really throughout Monday, it is a very similar picture. Always cloudiest towards the east, those showers turning wintry over higher ground sites, particularly the Pennines tomorrow. But over towards the west, it will be a little bit drier and a little bit brighter as well. Once again, though, northwestern Scotland, the Highlands and the Outer Hebrides seeing the best day overall. Cold for most of us, though, 5-4 degrees Celsius as our top temperatures, and on that wind chill factor, it's going to be feeling more like freezing. And it's a picture we've got to get used to because it's going to stay that way throughout this week. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. President Trump has talked a lot about tariffs and he's threatened many countries. Last weekend he said that he was imposing a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada, before then rapidly suspending those duties to allow for further discussion. On Friday, the president again made a delay, holding off from imposing tariffs on small packages coming in from China. Well, how does the president's activity impact us at home, and how will his duties shape economic policy across the world? Joining me now is the Professor of US Politics, David Dunn. David, welcome to GB News. Great to talk to you. Now, politics, that's what you're a professor of. I'm interested in this. How do you think he's using tariffs? Is it in order to balance the balance sheet between him and other countries, between the United States and other countries? Is it as a way of punishing other countries? Is it as a way of raising taxes or an alternative to taxes? If it's the latter, if he keeps negotiating away the tariffs, how is he going to be able to bring down taxes?
Well, Michael, that's the $5,000 question, and there's a huge amount of uncertainty as to which of those it is. Interestingly, the markets think that this is a tactic, especially with regard to Canada and to Mexico. And certainly the last time round, despite all the threats and the bluster, the number of tariffs that were actually there at the end of the Trump administration was relatively minor, so much so that actually Joe Biden kept those on and indeed added to them in certain strategic areas. So if they were judging it by the record of his first term in office, we would think this is a negotiating tactic. This is part of him blustering and threatening and getting concessions on other things such as the fentanyl or the immigration policy, or it's to do with actually a performative role in front of his public, making it clear to his voters that he did what he said he would do. And actually there's not much substance to it. And yet there is also the idea, of course, that Trump has been a long supporter of tariffs, and he has talked about this as being a major source of revenue. Now, if it's that, if he does intend to follow through and get trillions of dollars worth of revenue from this external revenue service that he talks about, then that's an entirely different matter, and that would be much more disruptive to global trade, to trade in the Americas, to trade between the EU and the UK and the United States, and indeed create instability and uncertainty in world markets. And because we don't know which of these it is, there's a huge waiting game going on to see how it pans out.
It's quite a quandary for the president personally, because he is a dealer. He loves making deals, and therefore he wants to prove that he can be successful making deals. So if he threatens a tariff and then he gets a great concession out of Mexico or a great concession out of Canada, he would like to tell people, I made a deal and I've delivered a prize worthwhile for the United States. But in the process, if that means that he doesn't impose a full tariff that he thought of in the first place, he's not going to have the revenue to cut people's taxes. So the more that he's successful with his deal making, the less money he's going to have. That is a bit of a quandary, isn't it?
It is a quandary, and it's a one that plays between the tension between politics and economics. So, for example, he can claim massive success in forcing the Colombians to take back Colombian citizens on US military planes in shackles, despite their objections, by threatening them with a massive tariff policy on them, and the politics are that great. It doesn't really matter much because there's no damage to the economic relations between those countries. But if there is a desire to raise money on that, that's a different thing entirely. But again, the markets are looking at this and thinking, actually, let's look at the first term. And what did he do in the first term? He actually borrowed the money. So America is now trillions of dollars in debt, more as a consequence of the Trump administration, because he actually didn't follow through on using tariffs as a revenue-raising mechanism. And the record of the Trump administration is of fiscal laxity. Actually, America is massively in debt. And the tax cuts that are coming up for renewal that he imposed the first time round will cost America another $4 trillion. Now, he may try and get that from us, but the suggestion is that he won't, because this will damage his friends in Wall Street. And he's all focused on the numbers of where Wall Street is going. And it's more likely that he will pass the burden on to a next generation by borrowing money in order to fund these, rather than having revenue-raising tariffs.
So I think you're saying that the markets at the moment believe that he's not going to put on significant quantities of tariffs, and therefore they're going to be more worried about the United States' fiscal position. Now, supposing they're wrong, supposing the tariffs are higher than the markets think at the moment, what do you believe are the damaging consequences, because that is what you believe, to the world trading system?
I think that what we'll see is, I mean, it depends where they go. I mean, Mexico and Canada, if they were to have significant tariffs, not even 25%, but even 10%, that will slow their economy, likely push their economies into recession. It will be massively dislocating to a pattern of trade that's really been there since 1994 with NAFTA, and that will be damaging to everyone's economy. If the tariffs are just on China, 10% there, and if they're imposed in strategic areas, that might be less damaging. China will diversify. They're already seeking different markets to the US for their manufactured goods, and that's a focus there. I mean, if Trump were to keep on the strategic investment that the Biden administration done and trying to build industry that way, that would be a way of spurring growth. And the fact that America's economy is doing well comes down to the fiscal stimulus that Biden did through the Inflation Reduction Act. But Trump's talking about reversing large sections of that because he doesn't like subsidizing green technologies. But in terms of if he imposes tariffs on the EU, then that will slow global trade. It'll likely be inflationary in all those countries involved, so in America and in Europe, and it's likely also to actually cause frictions in the wider relationship. I mean, the bizarre thing with Trump is that he's not just focusing tariffs on his strategic enemies, but actually he's actually imposing these on his main allies at the same time as they're demanding that he actually increases defense spending rather. And you can't increase defense spending if your economy is slowed as a consequence of tariffs imposed by America.
Yes, but you might increase your defence spending if you were frightened about having a tariff imposed upon you. So there might be a deal to be done. Thank you very much indeed, David Dunn. Coming up today is National Pizza Day. The host of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young, will join me with a selection of the Italian staple for us to sample. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
You may well be thinking of escaping the cloudy skies of the UK and heading to the Mediterranean, though it is rather mixed out there at the moment. There are some heavy showers and thunderstorms across parts of Malta and Sicily, though recent snowfall across the Alps should hopefully help with some skiing conditions. Perhaps the most settled conditions across parts of southern Iberia, Portugal and Spain, though there is some showery rain pushing into parts of Madeira as well. Generally, it is going to be the west that holds on to the most settled conditions during this week as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This was thought to be a Ruskin. Ruskin was a very considerable polymath, an artist as well as many other things. So do you know why it was submitted for reappraisal? Was there a bit of a suspicion that it had been misidentified?
No, as you say, you know, it's a service that Christie's offer. You can submit an artwork that you have, so anyone can submit it and request an estimate, and then the auction house's appraisal service allows you space as well to describe it and ask for evaluation. And Christie's sort of looked at it behind the sheet of dirty old glass and recognised a sort of Turner-esque mood and feel and ambience about it. And because there was this close relationship between Ruskin and Turner, which is fascinating, we'll come on to that shortly, but they sort of felt, well, the brushstrokes are very strong, the line is very economic, and the colour of the palette seems to be rather Turner-esque. And then they called in a specialist paper historian who confirmed that actually the paper that was used was one that Turner favoured himself. So yes, it was originally considered to be by Ruskin, but then we discovered something more magnificent. And don't forget, what's really interesting, now it's for sale. The lucky buyer is not just buying a picture. The lucky buyer is buying a life story, a relationship that actually changed the course of art history because of the relationship between Ruskin and Turner themselves.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Today is National Pizza Day, and the way to celebrate that is by sampling different varieties of the Italian staple. And joining me now is the host of Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young. Hannah, it's great to see you again. I don't know whether the camera can yet capture the fact that this table is groaning under the weight of pizzas. And because we don't have very much time, I think we ought to start eating pizza
Absolutely.
pretty quickly. For instance, I see this one over here. Do you want to tell me something about this?
So I just would love to shout out the two wonderful brands that have sent us in some pizzas. We've got Santa Maria, which is sort of one of my favourites in London, and we've got Napoli on the road. He actually won the best pizza maker in Europe in 2024. You're eating the classic margherita.
Yes.
As you can see, these are all sort of similar style pizzas. They are Neapolitan pizzas from Napoli in Naples. And I would say in this country, in the UK, this is the sort of style of pizza we're most used to. There are obviously other styles. There's Chicago deep pan. There's Detroit style. There's so many kind of from around the world. But what I love, and I know you like your facts and your history, is that although it is the Italian staple, it was actually first recorded in the 6th century in Persia under Darius the Great.
In the 6th century
BC, yes. Under Darius the Great, the soldiers would bake flatbreads with cheese and dates on their battle shields because it was so hot. What a great fact that is. At least it was that was how they would eat to kind of keep themselves up with energy.
A fresco that has been discovered recently in Pompeii.
Yes.
Apparently shows a pizza.
Oh, well.
So we're talking about 1st century.
OK. Well, we'll need to debate that one.
In literature is 997 AD. Now that's Pompeii that's on the screen at the moment. But in the modern era, they're associated with Naples.
Yes, they are. And I think, sort of in true Italian fashion, I have to talk about this particular pizza. This is...
there's a little image on the screen there. I think that's from the early 19th century. That's a Neapolitan pizza maker.
Well, there we go.
Just to show that we've done our research here. Now, you're going to do something rather clever here.
Yeah. So...
We've got a pizza here.
So this is a pizza...
A lump of burrata on the top.
Yes, from Puglia.
From Puglia.
One of my favourite regions.
Lift that up.
In Italy.
Now, what are you going to do this?
So the idea here is that this is a fresh ball of burrata.
That's fantastic.
We are going to cut that open. It's going to ooze all over the pizza, and I'm going to get you to try a slice.
Very good.
You ready?
Can you perform that?
Yes.
In that
I can.
angle?
Hold on. Let me get that. I might need to... Sorry.
No, you're doing well.
There we go. Let's rip that open.
Oh,
obviously, burrata
lovely.
being the mozzarella that's filled with all that delicious cream. Oh, look at that. Beautiful.
So it's creamier than mozzarella?
Yes, it is.
Mozzarella is the... I'll put it down now and you can have a bit of a spread.
Yeah.
Mozzarella is the classic ingredient along with tomato sauce, is it not?
Absolutely, which we have here with the margherita. But as you can see, there's so many different types of toppings these days. This one over here has cotto ham, it has salami, it has shiitake mushrooms and olives and artichokes. This one has sort of like this is a bit more spicy. It's got chili, it's got some spicy salami on it. So as you can see, you can be very creative.
And this is the spicy one.
OK, do you want to take a slice of this? I've got a nice...
I do.
Or are you... Also, interestingly...
I was going to say, don't try this at home. You must try this at home, but
here we go.
Be warned that it is a very messy...
I'm going to put this on this plate over here for you.
Great. Very messy process.
There are rules when it comes to Neapolitan pizza that after I did a bit of research.
I bet one of them is you've got to eat it with your hands.
Well, it would be a crime to eat pizza with a knife and fork, in my opinion, personally. The idea is that you're meant to get the flop. You need to kind of fold it in half and put it into your mouth.
You're not serious. What, hold it up like that?
Well, the other way, but you can do whatever you want.
The other way? I don't know what you mean.
But I'd love to tell you about some interesting specific rules to kind of call it a Neapolitan pizza. It must be baked in a wood-fire domed oven. The base, so the dough, must be hand-kneaded. You do not use a rolling pin. You don't use any other apparatus. The idea is that you're sort of massaging the dough out into 35 centimetres in diameter. So you can see these pizzas are all sort of similar size. They're from different places, but you can see they're kind of following the same rule of thumb. What do you think? What do you think? This is my favourite one.
I'm very glad the camera wasn't on me then. I think it was. Well, I love this one with burrata. I was asked earlier by Camilla what were my views about having fruit like pineapple on pizza.
Well...
I said I thought it was a crime.
I couldn't agree more. I have to say I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I do not think that pineapple has any place on a pizza. For me, the beauty of pizza is its simplicity.
Yes.
It's all about produce and good ingredients. And if you look at the famous margarita, there are literally 3 ingredients on there. That is it.
Yeah.
And that's all you need.
Because you put some basil on there, haven't you?
Yes.
Very good. Well, I think we've done justice to these. If you care to leave them behind, there's an army of people in the studio.
I got bombarded trying to walk in here.
You were lobbied on.
Oh, yes.
I can believe that. And we got some lovely Malbec to wash it down with as well. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you, Hannah Harley-Young. Thank you to all of my guests for joining me this week. We've had some quite sombre subjects this week, but I hope that hasn't cast too much of a shadow over your Sunday. It's been a real privilege to share your company anyway. I'll be back next week. Coming up next will be Dawn Newsom, so please stay with her for the weekend, while Hannah and I continue to eat our pizzas and to drink our Malbec. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. This is your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. We are in a quite stagnant weather situation at the moment. High pressure that has set itself up across Scandinavia is essentially acting as a blocking system and leading to a very similar weather pattern day in, day out at the moment. It's an easterly wind that set itself up, and that is providing a lot of moisture and a lot of cloud feeding in from the North Sea, with some outbreaks of rain and showers around as well. Some wintry flakes falling over higher ground routes, particularly the Pennines and the Grampians. If you are further towards the west, there'll be a few clearer spells this evening and overnight, particularly for northwestern Scotland, where it will turn quite chilly, maybe as low as -5, -6 degrees Celsius, but underneath the cloud elsewhere, temperatures will be holding up more around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. Despite that very chilly start across northwestern Scotland on Monday, though, it is here where we're going to see the most lengthy spells of sunshine right throughout the day. Once again, for the Highlands, the Outer Hebrides, parts of Argyll and Bute, it is going to be quite a lovely, fine day. Elsewhere, cloud is going to be plaguing us, very grey and dull skies. Again, further outbreaks of rain and showers around, falling as snow once again, particularly for the Peak District and the Pennines. Tomorrow we could see a few centimetres building up during the day. We do then also have to factor in the strength of that easterly wind that will be increasing on Monday, so that's going to make it feel particularly cold. Very biting wind that, whilst temperatures on the thermometer will be around 5-6 degrees Celsius at best, it is actually going to feel more like freezing when you add on the strength of that wind, so certainly is a day to be wrapping up warm when you are outside. Generally, things stay very similar into the evening period, and actually that stagnant weather situation is going to continue for a good portion of this forthcoming week. So expect particularly eastern areas to be cloudier overall. Generally in the west, you've got a greater chance of seeing a touch more sunshine around, but temperatures still below average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2